SPL or whatever it is, the actual file there that has all the CRUD calls and does the heartbeat monitor. But ultimately you have to have an automated system to do that allows you to, and it's not that hard to implement something. I mean, heck, EHP does it, but I would say as far as security-wise is concerned, we could do something like this, because if you notice it says, oh, I guess that's the company, never mind. It says auth 0. I was thinking it was OAuth, even though that's an older...
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they used OAuth.
Because, I mean, that, like, we could piggyback still off of the Alfred State accounts, right? Because that's how ultimately Blackboard does it. Everything else, I believe it's using OAuth too, but I would have to double check or triple check on that, because heck, you can use SAML. We're not going to use LDAP, I know that. Like, we're at least modern to, like, past that extension. But
Yeah. Is there any reason why we can't just use encrypted cookies? Because that solves your session problem and it's perpetual login, so it adds a user experience.
I mean, you can do that. Like, I mean,
because
things that we're talking about. Go ahead.
I was going to say, because that way we don't have to download this library, and it's pretty easy to implement just a encrypted cookie. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can do that. There's multiple ways of going, and obviously setting up security. This just pops in my head because this is.
Yeah, I've seen this around. Yeah.
And it was super easy to implement, but so I guess I digress with that.
Well, let's put it up. Well, yeah, let's put it up to the students that we got here. So, Mike and Sarah, do you want to do this library, JWT, for just to know how to do it, especially if it's going to be popular out in the development world? Or do you want to do an encrypted cookie, which we would do ourselves?
Maybe maybe the library. Like if we're more likely to use that, like in the field.
I mean, I don't know. The places I've worked out in the actual development area is with a bunch of frameworks, so this was built in, so it's hard for me to say.
Well, honestly, the way things should be going, honestly, like, I mean, so this, and I know it's hard for a programmer to say this, the bad R word, it's worse than any other swear word you can say, but this would be a redundant system, or redundant security in that sense, because, like, ultimately, if you're going and you grab this JWT and once you've accessed, or once you basically initially authorize the user, then wouldn't you just actually encrypt that user's cookie that way? So that way they're not susceptible to, I don't know, certificate hijacks or something like that. Like, even if they go and they grab that cookie, somebody is able to pull that data from the user's browser, they're not going to get anything. Not that there's much for them. The thing that I would be more concerned with is if we're going to have students be able to like auto log in with their Alfred State accounts.
Mm-hmm.
That is where I could see the problematic portion coming in. Like, oh, you guys didn't go and follow these types of rules because you guys are just a bunch of like trailblazing hotshots that don't listen to anybody or something like. We're the keyboard cowboys, and we weren't paying attention to, oh, this is how we're supposed to implement an OAuth call based off of SUNY requirements or something like that. And I could tell you this from the little time that I spent over at AU, like, just from experience, it's similar to basically trying to become a lawyer with all of the stupid little, like, there's a handbook that you could pretty much go and get a bachelor's degree in just to be learning all of the things that like the do's and don'ts when it comes to building something, right? So, I mean, then that goes back to, okay, are we going to have it so that they have their own username and passwords, similar to kind of like what NetLabs, or do we want to piggyback off of OAuth? Because I mean, ultimately, we're trying to go, if from a UX experience, we're wanting to make it as user friendly as possible, or as seamless as possible as well.
Yeah, there's two ways to look at that. We can do, if we're worried about security, we can keep that ecosystem within us, and that allows us to do a little bit more risky things regarding security, where it helps the user experience. Or we can piggyback off of Microsoft. For the prototype, I didn't plan on doing any type of third-party anything, just because it's a sandbox for the students that want to participate. But when we got to the point where we're like, okay, we need to do this for real now, then that's when I planned on having that conversation. But if I was to extrapolate out, I'd imagine that we wouldn't, but I can easily see a scenario where we could. So I guess time will tell when we get to that point.
Yeah, I'm just spitballing here because I'm trying to come up with like, and ultimately, obviously, this is not my main project, but however, I don't know if I have anybody left on the foosball team because you took Dylan, so.
No, he said that he was going to do both, so.
Oh, he's going to do both. Well,
yeah.
I just haven't seen him respond at all.
Yeah, I mean, I can't respond or say anything for his actions, but yeah, he said that he would do both, and I haven't heard anything since. So, but with that said, it is break. Like there's a bunch of people that said that they were interested in this project too, and they haven't responded either. So, we'll see what happens. But so to bring it back in languages, so
yes.
you're thinking Java would be best here.
Well, so what I'm thinking is if we use Java, because, and yes, you're right with the whole, if when you're talking about the asynchronous processing that JavaScript provides in the sense of the promises and waits and whatnot, in that way, yes, JavaScript has I'd say a more user-friendly library, where Java, you're gonna like, because ultimately, asynchronous programming is basically multi-threading, right? Because so I'm thinking of it in a way that when I had to do asynchronous processing with Apex for Salesforce, that's ultimately what we were doing, was we kept batching jobs. So we were grabbing data from different spots, but they were running like asynchronously in the sense they aren't dependent upon each other to get that data. It's just they all have to come back around to actually complete that task. But with Java, the benefit that I would think if we chose that, which, and I know that a lot of people would say C# because of the Xamarin crap, but Java would allow us to go and make, going forward, a cross-platform, like you were talking about, a desktop app. It does not have to be married, per se, to a website. And I know, I want to say Dylan has talked to me a little bit about, like, Android development stuff.
Yeah.
So if students are also interested in making an actual app, like, I mean, we won't talk about iOS because I mean, who really wants to do Objective-C anyway? But with Android,
or Swift, yeah.
Yeah, like because I mean that's what the Android development kit is based off of, Java. Now, don't get me wrong, they'll all use the framework once again because it blows my mind. I'm just setting up the UI real quick with an XML file, just a couple of
Yeah.
alterations, and you have a normal interface. But yeah, like I would say Java allows you to, like it might be overpowering, but at the same time, I mean, one thing that we talked about that I see isn't on this list would be, I guess maybe it falls underneath your admin section, but like the analytical or running analytics on all this stuff, like on all the data and whatnot. So kind of using like if we had that and piggybacked it off of I'm trying to think what the hell one name is. I'll have to look it up. I know it starts with a C, and I want to say Canvas, but it's not Canvas. It's one of those reporting APIs that you can bring into the UI to do better, like pie charts and graphs and whatnot.
Yeah, I planned on
Java might-
using D3 for that, but yeah, there's other ones out there, and I'm not sure if C is the right one, but it's not ringing a bell. But I do like your idea with Java in terms of not marrying it to the web server where you have to have an internet connection. With a progressive web app, we can completely avoid Android and iOS completely doing a PWA because it uses the browser. So you can do offline access just through the browser. And I think that would be a very good lesson for the students that are on board with this, because it separates, well, the world is going progressive web app, but it adds a significant amount of complication. So it'd be good for them to experience it on this type of level, because I don't want to call it a complicated project, but it is significant.
Yeah, there's a lot of rabbit holes to fall into, and I mean, look at just bringing me in to talk about languages. I can fall into all sorts of crazy rabbit holes. But anyways,
Yeah, we haven't even gotten over here yet for what data we're going to collect. So yeah, it's a thing that is a problem, and that's why technical meetings take 4 hours, it seems like. So yeah, so is there a benefit that I'm not considering with Java in terms of a progressive web app? Is there something special in there that I'm not aware of?
Not really, and honestly, with the like, you haven't. Yes, I haven't read up on the new J2EE. If anybody has actually looked at Java more recently,
Mm-hmm.
because Jakarta's about to push out that new, like, they're they're trying to go and actually do a J2E revamp, ideally, because even though everybody says J2EE, nobody's really used J2EE for quite some time, because it's actually using the servlets and everything, like that type of design.
Our servlets containers.
Yeah, because I mean, that was the great thing that I always liked about Java is you ultimately looked at it as such, like what you just said, containers. And I don't know if students know this or not, but like when it comes to any of these types of web technologies, for instance, like you have a web service, or you have you might I know that we've talked about a little bit, but like portlets, right? Like we were talking about with the Oracle application servers, where you could actually deploy Java projects to it. You can basically skin or create all sorts of different user interfaces with Java, and Java just sat there as the listener and just accepted every single UI or UX that was being passed to it. So that's ultimately why there's a lot. Well, the other thing is I guess I haven't played around a lot with the JavaScript routing per se, in the sense of how you would do the PWAs to send the data back for any of the data you're trying to receive or pull based on whoever you are. But I know with Java we can do annotations, and that basically cuts down tremendously. Actually, well, I think I'm gonna say this disclaimer. I'm gonna show you a project that has annotations in it really quick, and I promise this does not go and break any type of NDAs. Okay, for the students, that means non-disclosure agreement. Hey, let me find it.
Okay, since we got a,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, since we got a moment here, does Mike or Sarah have a question up to this point?
Not at the moment.
Okay, are you guys confused, lost? What's going on?
I came in, they're probably lost and confused.
I'm following like 40%. We're good.
I'm about the same.
I guess getting the gist is, take the biggest thing if you want to take away from a conversation like this is take the keywords that we're talking about and then store them for later, because you're going to run into them. Things like containers, things like Docker, things like servlets. Yeah, you'll run into them eventually, and then you go, oh, that's what they're talking about.
I don't know if this does it the same as Teams, but I am going to try to take over the screen share. That's perfect. All right. Let's hit that, and I'm going to click go live. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
All right. So let me actually control it. You notice up top here, all right? So when I say an annotation, and I know Razor Pages and Blazor or whatever it is, like Microsoft is going this way also. But up top here, so for instance, this is going to be your index or your default path when you call upon this action, ideally. Like, I mean, this one's a real basic one, and I think it was an initial setup. But like each one of these, this is how you just do it. You just up top, you just say, okay, cool. This is going to be a post. This is the path that they're going to end up hitting from the web address, and then we want to consume this type of data, and since it's coming through as a JSON object in the request body, that's how they're going to consume it. Right now, it's not encrypted. Or no, actually, this might be no, this one's an older one. Sorry. For instance, this one, however, this one's going and actually taking in JSON. They changed up the media type, but you're able to basically set these up really quickly and easily to go and say, okay, like here, ping it, whatever. There's a splash screen. Now, I know that depending on the framework you're using in JavaScript, for instance, the one that I use is AngularJS. If you set up routers, yes, it makes the calls, I guess from the other side, calling like a backend. It's very easy to go and set up because if you're actually setting up router .js files, you just call wherever you're going, which for the students, that basically means think of a JavaScript file that has something similar to this, and it just says, okay, cool, if we find that this condition is met, then, I don't know, let's go to authenticate. So, like, I've been talking about JWTs. If there's no JWT, then run this. Or something similar to that. I'm trying to scroll down a little bit more, and I'm not trying to give anybody whiplash about how quick I'm scrolling, but let's see. And this was the other thing I was trying to show. So you can grab your path parameters and query parameters to go and be able to build out different things. The one that I farther down, there's create model. I'm looking for. It's basically a conversion. It takes it from empirical to metric or metric to imperial, and actually takes it to two different types of metrics. But what is it? The imperial would be pounds per hour, so what, kilograms per hour, and I believe kilograms per second, which ultimately I'm like, well, you can actually find it either way, but whatever. Converting units. So you would end up initially calling this on the front end, and you're going to pass over all your data that's from your form, but it goes and it's accepting username, and this inputs and outputs. What it's actually doing is it says, okay, because there's inputs that the user could actually go and enter, but then there's outputs that, like, it's a dynamic number that's calculated however it be static in the sense of, well, Sarah knows because this was the thing in Lab 6 when I said with the calculator bring in three numbers. Do you, like, if you do 3 plus 3 plus 3, which equals 9, you want the user to be able to go and actually alter the answer box that says 9. You don't. So that's what the inputs and outputs mean. But each one of these are their own variables that are being passed through to be able to do your conversion. So you can ultimately have the application be split up into empirical and metric at the same time if felt the need to. But I feel that would be one of the benefits. I'm guessing probably Java, because in this day and age, if it's a popular programming language, they more than likely have this. Because the other thing I was going to bring up would be this guy. Is it still stuck on? Yeah, it's still stuck on the screen. Let me change my screen. Change windows. What? This right here. Okay. Hopefully you should see like a Google straight.
Yep, I got it.
Cool. Now, then this is a really, really advanced. It's not that advanced, however, like, I want to say out of all the different things that Java can provide for you, or like different plugins and whatnot, I think I might have had to explain this to maybe 3, possibly 4 Java, like, Java nerds like me, when they were wondering about it. But there's this thing, it's called Hibernate, and it's not talking about bears. But Hibernate, I'll type Java in it, but the one that I'm talking about, and yes, it has all sorts of extra things, like, yeah, you can do a reactive persistence, whatever. But what this creates is an object relational mapping, okay? And what this goes into is, and actually I think Professor Briggs might be the only person that knows this, but then again, I don't think he was shown this in OOP. An actual Pojo, or I'm saying Pojo, but I'll say a poo, right? Because I could drop the Java out of it, so acronym poo. A plain old object does not make a direct correlation to a database table. Like, the reason why databases just became a thing is because of the relationship management that they can provide for you, right? What this is supposed to do, even though, yes, I can, and I show all the students in OOP, the closest way that you can end up showing those relationships, but it starts turning into a one-to-many type thing. You can't show many-to-many this way, but where you just have your list of objects, and within that, you end up making the child object a list of objects if you're doing one-to-many. But this will go and actually create the more more conceptual way a database handles relationships. So many to one to many, one to one, many to many. This can do that. And what this also does if you know what a view is inside of a database, because just like anything else, you don't ever want the user to have be similar to a zoo, right? You always want the tiger to be behind the glass. If the glass isn't there, then the tiger's more than likely going to eat somebody's face off. Or, well, in that analogy though, the user could potentially be the tiger, right? Because maybe the tiger doesn't attack, maybe the tiger does. Meaning, maybe that person's a hacker, maybe they're not. With this, you always want to kind of keep making levels of encapsulation or basically making any type of program you're doing like layers of an onion. You just keep putting barriers between the actual raw data itself versus what the user or developer or whatever can touch. This is another way of doing it. You create this and it caches, or the big keyword here, persists or persistence. It creates every single piece of data inside of it as an entity, and you can deal with it at that level, which, although I've never been a part of one of the projects, and it was one of the concepts that I felt took off when, I've worked with Hibernate for quite some time, because I'm old in that sense, but you could go and actually do what could be considered actually asynchronous processing, because ideally, right, like if you go in, I don't know, you make an alteration, so I don't know, you have a profile, like I don't know if we're gonna set this up or not for this app, but we do create a username, sign me up, and you put your name and all the goofy stuff, and you put an avatar there, and yada yada yada. I'll throw this question out there. Do you actually need to go and instantaneously make that update? Now, I guess with the user, you probably want that, depending on what type of profile data they can alter. But I don't know, let's say if my chapter review question tests, it's a 1 to 20, A, B, C, or D. Do you ultimately have to have almost instantaneously the actual calculated score after you've taken the test? Not necessarily. It can end up going and actually use a queue or a stack-based design pattern there to go and then process it, and you can do it asynchronously, or you can batch it and send it all at once. Does that make sense, or am I going way too off in the jingle?
It makes sense to me, but how about the students? What do you guys think?
Still kind of gisting keywords.
Okay. I do have a couple questions about this Hibernate. So you said something about it's caching relational objects, right, from the database. Is this caching pre-done queries? Is this what it's doing? That's what it can be.
Okay, so ideally, the best way of going and setting this up, and I'm not going to go back to the project because this isn't the best way that it was set up. Is the project to use that as an example. If you use JPA, which is more annotations, and actually, no, I won't show that. Think of it like, I guess, Sarah might not know this. I don't know the other student, like how far they are in their, like how advanced they are in their programming, but when I said poo, and I know, yes, it's a joke, I'm saying poo. Do you understand what I mean when I say a plain old object?
Yes.
like it's just going to store data, right? So ideally, once again, because web developers are their own subset of prima donnas from normal programmers, they decided, well, we don't like the name of objects, so we're not going to call it a plain old object. We're going to call it a model object, because ideally, with any of that, you're creating data models, right? That's what your objects are supposed to represent, housing the data and doing the translations back and forth from your database to your application. What it used to be called, and it piggybacks off of the JPA provider. It's called, and this is you'll find this in a lot of different programming languages. The concept is auto wiring. Okay. What you are ultimately doing at that point is if you auto wire, for instance, a table, like what we're just talking about, you don't need to be running SQL queries, or in fact, they used to have what's called HQL, which is Hibernate Query Language. It was supposed to be a more like Java-style way of writing queries, and it never, like, people are like, really? Because writing SQL is really freaking simple. Now, I mean, yes, you can make it real difficult, but it's SQL. Anyways, you could take your plain old Java object where if you said, okay, ID, first name, last name, username, password, email, phone number, yada yada yada, and I don't know, let's say we're setting up an e-commerce site, and you want to show them like what Amazon will do, like they can show you your order history, right? So you might persist all of that data out of the database as you boot up this project, or sorry, when this project gets loaded onto an application server, it'll go and basically take any type of order that is associated with that user and keep it, have the actual relationship based off of it's ultimately a virtual ID, and Hibernate knows how to deal with it based off of, okay, cool, you have this data, and you might have the physical ID that you're passing back and forth through a JSON payload, but it then goes, and when you open up what's called a session, right? It's not a session like a normal website. They call it a session factory. So it's a session of basically a connection. That's how they wanted to call it. But you open up that, and it's an instance of that persistent data, and you can grab whatever entity you need for the actual UI. So that is the other big benefit about this. Their scalability. I don't know about the reliability, because right now I'm actually, although this has also been said, the back-end developers coming out and saying, well, I kind of probably botched the data, partly it's my fault, partly it's the project's fault, but right now I'm getting heap size errors on that project I was going in. I get to now play network admin or server admin for the project. Hashtag first world problems. So, yes, reliability, it's supposed to be very reliable when it comes to the actual mapping itself. It is very reliable. However, you both know what infinite loops are. You can do, it's basically the equivalent of an infinite loop in an actual database schema. If you have a table, what it boils down to is you start using what's called a composite key, and I don't know if either of you have database experience, but like that parent that has, like, so the user has all of those orders, right? But then one thing that you wanted to save inside of orders for some reason would be that user ID. Well, when it gets translated over into Hibernate, it'll find that ID, but what they do is they add an object, like they add the object at that ID reference. So what you do is you're basically ping-ponging back and forth to, okay, well, I'm at the parent of the user, now I'm at this order. Oh, the order's going, and it has this user's object associated with it, so it kind of points back to the original user, but it keeps kind of making it makes its own hierarchical tree that ultimately can run to infinity. It doesn't, like, it goes and it starts realizing after a while, like, I think it's like default wise usually 4 to 5 levels deep, and then it's like, wait a second, this is the same data that I keep persisting over and over again underneath itself. But anyways, this is another benefit that would come along with it, I guess. And I'm trying to stay high level with this, but this is one of those types of things where you start getting into more of the mechanics of how data flows through your application, how data is stored, how you actually are interacting with it, and at what level, and how you want to. And this is where, like, in my OOP class, I say the big thing that you learn out of, like, coming out of that is it depends. Like, that's the answer for almost everything. So heck, asking me about the programming languages, well, it depends. So that's why I'm kind of trying to plead my case for Java, not just because Java is the greatest programming language ever of all time. But anyways,
No, and that's exactly why we asked, because obviously your expertise is in Java, and I don't spend much time in that domain, so easily there could be something that I don't know. So just a tail off of what Professor Spear was saying earlier about basically if it's a popular language or something similar in terms of routing. Yeah, Express does this for Node. So right here, new profile, going to hit this fetch call, come over here, route, type a post, do what you need. So very similar setup
exactly.
between Java and JavaScript. So there is that. But the question that needs to be asked, because ultimately this is the student's project, do you guys want to learn front end and back end with a framework, which can be potentially easier, but can also be crippling when it comes to changing frameworks because you don't necessarily understand how it works. You just, let's use Angular as an example, you know how to do it in Angular versus understand how the system actually works. So what are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Well, oh, that Mike, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
I like the thought of not working with the framework because it kind of makes us think more. And it's probably just better experience altogether.
Mm-hmm. Sarah?
I'd have to agree. I think it'll be more educational to not use it.
Okay. All right, Spear, do you have a comment?
I always have a comment. No, I would say not like now the thing that you brought up with the whole Angular thing. Now, I actually have where, for instance, the framework stuff would become more of a problem is, for instance, in my shoes right now. So that project I'm doing is in what they call Angular 1 or Angular JS. So initially, Angular was set up in JavaScript, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you go and if you look anywhere else, so if you actually see Angular without the JS, it is predefined that it is what's called Angular 2, even though they're on version 10. Angular 2 uses a lot of TypeScript and basically a CLI to go and do a lot of templating and setup for your code, because you're writing it ultimately in TypeScript, and then it gets compiled using like Node.js, and then finally outputs a JavaScript file for basically the front end to interact with. Well, AngularJS, I believe it might actually be today. I'll have to go back and look. They are they've now gone and dropped their support of AngularJS. So in Google's eyes, AngularJS is dead. Everybody should be using Angular now. How true that is, who knows, because it is open source. Maybe somebody picks it up or whatnot. But yes, you will learn more without going and using a framework like Angular. That's why I don't show AngularJS. Like, that would have solved a lot of my problems when it came to web programming one semester if I would have just said, hey, let's play around with AngularJS. Because I could have shown a lot of stuff and condensed it way down. But I do agree that if you should never become codependent upon a framework when it comes to the mechanics of it. And I don't know, I think I used it in Sarah's class, the analogy that it's similar to, cool, almost every person, well, I say that, but most people, especially around this area, know how to drive a car. They get behind the wheel, they know how to turn the key on, they know how to put it into gear. I'd say they know how to drive manual, but that's even a smaller subset. And they know how to go and kind of point the where they want their car to go and try to go from point A to point B and follow the basic rules that our DOT has instilled in us, or we get tickets. But how many people, and I ask this quite a bit, not picking on anybody, how many people actually know how to change a tire, or you're driving along and your car just ends up dying and you just have to pull off the side of the road? Like, and then you have to troubleshoot it. And oh, by the way, you're going to the interview of a job, like, of a lifetime. Like, it's the exact freaking thing you want to do in IT, and you're going to get paid six figures, and you're 5 minutes from the place and the car breaks down. Now, yes, you can call them and say, hey, I had some car troubles, whatnot, and save face that way. But the other instances, you're out there with your significant other and your car breaks down. Do you really want to be, especially in, heck, right around this time of year? It gets, especially in the evenings, down into the teens, if not lower, not including the wind chill. You want to be sitting on the side of the road with your vehicle not running so you don't have heat for 45 minutes waiting for AAA or some wrecker to come to pick your car up, when all you needed to do is pop the hood and, I don't know, like, take a real quick look and, oh, hey, look, the battery terminal was loose and it jumped off the battery. And it was legitimately a 30-second fix. Like, that's where I start going and trying to give that analogy. And I say the tire thing because, I don't know, their generation, because as I go and once again make myself sound old, back in my day, seemed it's on a decline of even being aware that there is a spare tire in most vehicles, let alone knowing how to change said spare tire. But that's where I would say, okay, with a Angular or a, maybe not so much Spring Boot, but like I know with React, Ember and Vue, with those types of frameworks, how they end up doing a lot of simplifications of, like, because I can speak about Angular. Angular goes and makes fetches very, very simple because you can do $ HTTP calls. Okay? Mm-hmm. And it makes the promises and the weights and everything very, very simplistic versus doing an actual normal fetch. Even though a normal fetch is pretty simple. But however, I think one a main thing, because this would be my devil's advocate even to myself, a framework or a package similar to React or Vue or Ember or whatnot that would be, I feel, very beneficial would be, for instance, Bootstrap. So that way, like, in certain instances, you don't want to be reinventing the wheel. And I mean, and all in all, like, when you're out there in the real world, you shouldn't be reinventing the wheel. But yes, this is academia, so you need to understand how a wheel is made or how to invent a wheel to it. Guess if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a
But
time and a place, right? So if there's a solution out there, right, your time is more expensive than, say, more server, right? And that's typically the trade-off you're going to make. But there is a point where there's going to be a time where that library doesn't do what you want, and you have to have that skill set to be able to do it. And a lot of people get complacent because these libraries keep getting bigger and better. And then when they do need that skill, they don't have it. So that's essentially the conversation we're having here is how much skill do you want to build up, right? How much reinventing, to use a Spears term, do you want to do? So it sounds like both of the students that are here today, and I know Dylan's on the same page with this, that they care more about the learning than the frameworks or the tools. One thing I will say is that React and Vue, I think, are poor choices for who is participating at the moment, just because it is a significant deviation from how you actually do it, because they do so much behind the scenes for you that it's, yeah, that's one where I would actually come in and say, no, this is a bad choice. And that's one of the few that I would say, no, it's a bad choice.
yeah, I completely agree with those. And I guess I could see where the argument might be with like Angular, because Angular ultimately is providing you like a MVC or an MVVC framework.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's close enough where I'd feel comfortable giving this out and being like, okay, there's only little deviations that you need to be aware
yeah,
of.
they tried to stick to the actual uh, JavaScript standards when they created these, at least with AngularJS. I would say, I mean, because I've looked at the TypeScript stuff, and because a lot of it starts turning into the whole Node.js. And don't get me wrong, yes, you, as Professor Briggs has seen, I like, I'm not a huge fan of Node.js. I don't have a problem with it, but a lot of it with Node.js is you're building from package builder, like it, similar to, well, they're not going to know that about Unix either. Like you have a package manager and you're building everything up, and then you can spin up a server because you have those types of packages and what have you. But
Yeah, I'll
yeah,
show
like,
them what you mean. Give me a second. So my project is quite simple, but some more complex projects, this starts turning into 100 lines of just pull in this npm package and here's a bunch of extra things. So yeah, that's one of the major downsides with Node. There's two ways to look at it. You can keep it really light, like I have, where I'm doing most of the work because academic and I wanted to learn. But most places are going to be, oh, there's a library for that. Let npm install this thing. So, yeah, that's a significant downside, no doubt about it.
but well, and well, I guess if we're really talking about that though, like the only one that I would say out of your programming languages that doesn't do this per se would be C# and the .NET framework, because the .NET framework, yes, you can bring in, maybe you can. I guess I've never really tried third-party libraries and whatnot, or dependencies, and but ultimately the .NET framework is self-contained. It's its own organism, which I'm. If you saw my message the other day talking about the whole log4j, uh,
Hmm.
there they're calling it Log4j, but it's actually Log4j2 exploits. One of the reasons why this is actually like they're calling, like I said, they're calling it the modern COVID, or sorry, the digital COVID of the programming or IT world at the moment, is because with these, you're grabbing different packages, or like I said, the term is the dependency. You're dependent upon that library. So, and I mean, since I had Sarah on programming 1, we would do like using static system.console. So we were dependent upon typing that, so that way we didn't have to type console every single line inside, like whenever we want to call a write line or a read line or a read key, for instance. Log4j is a very, very heavily used and implemented logging framework, more specifically for Java. And in fact, it's, if you start looking at like the bigwig names now, yes, the original one was Sun, but Oracle bought them out. Well, I would say the next in line when it comes to Java, that when it comes to a company, would be Apache, or the Apache Foundation. Okay, and you might have heard of Apache, for instance, for HTTPD servers. And yes, they have other things that are not necessarily Java-based per se, at least from your standpoint, because you can run PHP off of HTTPD. However, guess what the HTTPD server is coded in? It's a Java server. So all of these, and since Log4j so happens to fall under the Apache Foundation, they're obviously going to use their own proprietary projects in the other ones to try to, basically they're trying to get buy-in from other open source developers. Like, oh, well, there's a lot of other logging frameworks out there. Actually, I have a meme that's pretty funny. I'll send that to you later, Justin. Like about it's a picture of The Office, and it's the one where it shows Steve Carell, where he has the longer hair. He's like looks like a teenager, and he's getting like an Employee of the Month thing, and it's like thanking him for fixing the Log4j exploit, and it says, really, I just did all of my logging using system.out.println.
Yeah, that's one way of handling that. Not a good way, but one way.
Exactly. Anyways, the way these all work is, think of it like and that's the problem with a lot of these. And they say when you're building these types of applications, you want to build them on the shoulders of giants. Well, the question then becomes, well, how sturdy is the giant that you're actually building your application on? And really, in all reality, a lot of these are more like a house of cards. So this exploit that ultimately was happening, and it's a real bad exploit, by the way. Did either of you two look into it, or Dustin, did you look into it?
I've heard of it. I've had to spend time on courses, so I haven't really looked into it.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah. I know it's bad because it's everywhere, because I keep seeing it. So it's got to be same thing with the VMware problem a couple months ago.
Yeah, no, this is one that basically Java is lucky that they are like, and this is coming from, like I said, Java's the greatest of all time. Java has enough years of I guess it's that old enough that it's going to be able to take this blow. If this would have happened, even if it was, I would say, any programming language, if Python was less than a decade old and they found this exploit, I mean, they're still losing quite a bit of customer and user, or hell, even developer buy-in for Java anymore. But what it ultimately is doing is this: is if and they probably don't know what it is, but SQL injection, for instance, So you can end up going and writing SQL statements inside of just a normal string and hijack somebody's database that way. With this log4j thing, what it does is, since log4j, a logger is technically a very, very low level package, so it has root almost. I'm talking in the Unix sense, but it has root privileges. What this will do is you can actually go and inject into the logger. It's. And I'm trying to think, because I haven't shown them at all any type of this, but you can end up going, and it's why people love Python. You can open an instance of basically like a prompt or a script shell, ideally, is what it's called. Like yeah, and you can start going and firing off your own freaking processes out of that shell. So you could totally it makes your machine's a zombie instantaneously. But yeah,
Yeah.
Now, as far as how bad this is hit, and that's another thing. Actually, they've created a package which or a little program that you can run. But we were actually talking about that in my one status meeting the other day. Ultimately, they're doing a grep on the system and looking for anything that's called log4j 2, like anything that's calling that dependency, because they'd be importing it into a file. If they find it, it says, "Yep, you can be having this exploit happen." And you have to then patch it by ultimately, I don't know, apparently disabling your logger. But they're trying to go and obviously remedy the situation, but this is actually a big issue now, because they actually found people using that exploit as well and going unnoticed until random. And yeah, Justin, you probably be too. Oh no, I don't know. I want to say it was in 20 teens, but I think I know it's before 2015. I want to say it was either 12, 13, or 14. I know that really narrows it down, but everybody says how great Unix is because it never gets hacked and whatnot. Well, they then found it was when they found their first exploit, and come to find out it was because there was once again a dependency on this really, really old package. In fact, I believe they found that it was from like the 1980s, like it was like 1984 or 1986, and it hadn't been upgraded, period, like since then. The analogy, talking to like higher end people, what they say is, yeah, you have your Oracles creating packages, you have your Apaches or Microsofts, they're creating secured code for developers to use, but then you have Brad that lives out in the heartland of Nebraska back in like 1983, only had 2 semesters of some CS degree, and he ended up dropping out to go back work on the family farm, but he still wanted to keep his love of programming, so he ended up going and writing a package, because all of this is open source, because that's the downside of open source, and what they're trying to also push with this, and what I keep saying, fake news. I don't want people to think I'm that type of Trump supporter. Anyways, this is a very bad thing, and yes, it could potentially be, you can, in certain ways of looking at it, this would be the digital equivalent of COVID. But the difference is we can't ultimately, I mean, yeah, there is let's take a 6-inch swab and shove it up the nostril of all of these packages, which, like I said, was let's check what packages you're calling or dependencies you're calling for a project. But you need to be aware of these types of things. It's like just the best thing you can do is always keep your head on a swivel. And I mean, as pessimistic as it may sound, don't trust anybody. Like, That's how you harden and secure your code. And also don't be like, because if you like to go and pick on all the other IT people, because ultimately programmers are the best ever because we created all of their jobs anyways. We are the creators of the kingdom. Don't be that guy or girl that's the programmer that ends up going and says, oh, I secured it enough by going and, I don't know, sanitizing my string so I've protected against SQL injection. But yes, there's certain security design patterns that you can implement in your code to, I don't know, protect against certain other types of exploits that could happen on your code. And because you don't know them, for instance, or don't ever fall victim of saying, well, since it's not my job, I'm not gonna, I'm taking it to this point. Because I'm sure you both have, I know all of us have worked in team settings, and especially in academia, and you've had at least one team where there was at least one person there that was selected on your team, and you knew, initially, first off, when the teacher said, or instructor said, oh, you're partnered with so and so, and you're like, oh, damn it, this is gonna suck because he or she's one of those loafers that just kind of floats in and out of class and doesn't really engage whatsoever. And guess what? Same thing happens during your project, right? You end up having to do their work for them. And I mean, this should sound probably true to all of you. That's one of the reasons why team projects are given. When teams don't work well, it's a lesson. But
you also have
yes.
to deliver a product too. You can't just be like, oh, my partner didn't do anything. So
exactly. And that's how it is in the real world.
Yeah.
And the problem overall is, you are the developer and you are considered the face to that application. They keep going to you and you keep building them user interfaces. So if somehow it gets exploited, somebody hacks into their system using your application or project, guess who's to blame? Even though, yes, you have the security team that should have gone and made sure that the holes were plugged, or sorry, they should be going in and harping on the network admins who should have then gone and made sure that there was firewalls in place to go and stop this, and then the server admins that should have not had the ports open, but they still did anyways, and whatnot. It still goes, oh, you know what? They hit your application that was a website, so it's your fault. And throughout your career, and I'm not trying to bum you out this way, but you will be the scapegoat of many negative things. However, this goes past being a scapegoat, and this is more being a patsy. Because usually when it's, depending on how bad the hack was, I've talked to students about the Target hack that happened, 2015-ish or so. And ultimately, it was because of some, it's probably one of the PC tech people's oversight. They just didn't even think about it. Everybody has autoplay on their USB sticks. Well, somebody ended up taking just a USB stick, walked back into electronics where there's usually not employee there, and if they're stacking, I don't know, putting CDs, even though they don't exist anymore, on the shelves, or fixing up the shelves, whatever. The person walked over and just legitimately had access to the physical PC, which you shouldn't have, but was able to plug it into the USB port, and there was a .ini file that ended up running because of autoplay, because the cash registers were, guess what, running Windows. They never shut it off, and that's how Target lost, what was it, 15,000? I think it was close to that. It was either 10 or 15,000 people's credit cards. And even though it wasn't widely discussed, and I want to say it was like 2015-ish or so. I mean, it wasn't recent. I say it's recent because it's recent to me.
Yeah, it's relatively recent.
Happened in the last decade. There you go. That was the result. So it must. Okay, maybe it was that 2013. Okay, like I said, it was in. So, and this was actually, I've talked to people about this with PCI compliance. So based off of that, they found that they weren't in PCI compliance, and it says that one of them said that Target ended up going and basically having to pay, like you saw the millions of dollars. They had to pay those fines, like to the people that for every single credit card they lost. And it used to be, like I said, I haven't had to work in PCI compliance for quite some time. Yes, I've had to work in HIPAA and stuff, which are similar, but PCI compliance states the penalty, and this is a government law, by the way, for every one, so like a single credit card that is lost by a corporate entity or anybody that's going and basically taking a payment from a consumer. If you lose that consumer's credit card information, you then owe a fine of $250,000. Every single number that is found that was taken because you didn't go and keep it safe, which is why pen testers exist, actually, because one of the big roles that you do is you'll work for a PCI compliance firm to make sure that there's no way that some simple hack or exploit would be able to go and take that data. But the company needs to make sure they're taking the correct precautions, like telling you to lock your screen when you walk away from your computer. They don't leave passwords sitting on. Don't worry, you'll go through all the HR spiels when you get older, but I digress. But anyways, yes, I know I once again hijacked the conversation to.
Yeah, I was just waiting to see if it was just a thought
I'm done.
or
Yeah,
not. Okay.
Yeah, I'm done with my thought.
Okay. So, it does sound like Node.js is a good starting point for a prototype, at least for them. It exposes them to quite a bit. I'm going to have to work with Sarah a good bit here because she's going to get hit with a couple potholes really fast for the things that we haven't covered yet, and we're going to need them.
Okay.
Mike, the student, I think he's going to be all right for the most part. So, Mike, I'm talking to you at this point. For the next couple of days, try to get a Node.js server up and running. So you're going to want to use the Express routing package or routing library. It's going to make your life a little bit easier. You're going to want to implement a template engine of some sort. I recommend EJS because it's syntactically more similar to what you're used to versus something like a pug, which is white space dependent, which is annoying to say the least. And try to get a database connection. So we're probably going to use MongoDB for a variety of reasons. MongoDB has that hibernate function built into their just library. Doing it like that, and it's just JSON as well, so they do quite a bit of caching. That's part of the reason why when it gets big, it's so much faster. But but in terms of what data we're collecting, Mike, don't worry about it too much. Just get it to the point where we have the wiring down, where you can pull something out of the database or put something in, and then be able to send it to the client, and that's going to get you most of the way there. And by the time you're done with that, I will be working with Sarah with some of the PWA concepts that we're going to have to go over, which is going to be significant. So that's going to take a little bit of time.
So, and I'm not trying to like, once again, I just actually wanted to bring it up because I know if we had Professor Inky here, because there's his favorite programming language as well.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys like decide not like because
PHP.
I guess why is PHP not on there? Yeah, because I mean, yes, with Node, Node works great. How you just explained it, yeah, you're gonna spin up a server and stuff, and that's where the Java stuff would lack. You're gonna have to manually install a binary that is your app server. Make sure you've put all the maps in your system environments, yada yada yada. But
Yeah, environment for Java is pretty rough.
If you don't know what you're doing, if you haven't gone but that's also why like I cry myself to sleep at night. So, anyways, like I know all of this and I can't shut it off. PHP has XAMPP or LAMP or WAMP or MAMP or whatever operating system you want to throw in front of it. AMP.
As long as it cooperates. I've done lots of tinkering on Linux just because it doesn't work. So, but yeah, for Windows it seems to work, where it's just start this and everything seems to work. But
that's what I was gonna say. I don't think that. Well, I know especially because I've been picking on Sarah last week because she was doing the GUI stuff with her what did they call it? That Microsoft Surface. That's right.
Yeah. Garbage.
And her stuff kept lagging. So then she's like, "Well, I got it when I was a business student." And I was like, "Well, we all make mistakes." Anyways,
That we do.
yeah,
I don't know about.
She compounded her mistake because she's doing all of her projects off an SD card, so it doesn't make it any better.
I need to wipe my computer.
Yeah. So I mean, for the time being, we just need to get knowledge down for the students.
Okay.
And then we can take a serious look at, because I'm a little bit fond of the idea of using something like an Angular, which incorporates TypeScript, and seeing how that's going to go. I don't mind Java, but with a project like this, it's probably going to outlive all of us because we're going to have to give it to the school anyways. So C# might be the best option there for longevity. So I'm not sure, but we got to get to a point where we can actually be functionable, and then we can choose from there. So we got to get off the ground first.
Yeah, and actually, well, we'll have to do. Well, since it's your project, one of you all will have to go and look into. Because whether you guys know it or not, yes, Java used to always be free. However, after Java, if you're using anything later than Java 8, which, oh, by the way, is still, I believe it is still in long-term support, but it is the oldest, like the very oldest one that you really want to go to.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going and releasing anything that's going to be used in production, you actually, as far as enterprise is concerned, you have to pay licensing fees, or else you have. That's why, if you notice, with Linux, they don't install the old JREs like straight from Oracle anymore. They have OpenJDK, and yes, even though OpenJDK is still ran by Oracle, and they've said yes, we are going to make sure that we keep like OpenJDK 17, for instance, is supposed to be almost as close to identical as it can be to the JRE that's Java 17 that Oracle's releasing. But once again, that goes into, because we're in academia, and I don't know if, since it starts getting in a real gray area, because we could be considered a non-for-profit in one way. And then, in another way, I mean, ultimately everything is a for-profit. So, like, there's still money that needed to be made. So that's where it starts getting into a gray area.
Well, for the time being, if we can get multiple departments in the school to use it, I think that's going to be an achievement. So
Yeah,
for the time being, I don't think it's a problem. But if we ever got to the point where it's like, hey, here's multiple schools, we got to have that conversation.
Yeah, but look at how many. And I know I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm not trying to that way, but look at how many investigations, or I'm not gonna say scandals per se, but like Alfred State has hit the news quite a few times, and I'd say probably the last year or two, and not in the brightest of light.
Mhm.
And
I mean, I'm not paying attention. What are they in the news for?
let's see. Supposedly, it's a slew of different things. So one was would deal more with you and me of being like, what is it? They were not they're having a problem with basically putting down minorities that were employees here, so they weren't getting the type of promotions and stuff. So there was that investigation going on, and then there was the student body that was saying that like faculty and staff were going and putting them down. There's another one that went on, and it was like something to deal with the administration making like six figures or something like that, and basically waving a blind eye to like everybody else. Like, I'm not gonna start saying salary numbers, but you can actually go out, since we are state employees. Our what
It
we
should be
make,
public information. Yeah.
it is public information. And like, for instance, I didn't really feel as bad about myself, but when I saw, like, for instance, what Inky was making, I'm like, wow, because he's been there since I was in high school or middle school. I want to say, I think it was 8th grade when I first met him, and I think it was when he'd been like a professor here for a year.
He's
or two
been
now.
here for a long time.
Yes, he has. But and then I saw how much he was making as he had to go through all the crap that he takes. I'm like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, man.
Yeah.
So there's been a bunch of things like that, and it's, I mean, yeah, there's some things that
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of politics.
yes, but it's newsworthy politics. And oh, by the way, oh my God, we're going, and even though we made this, and it wouldn't even be blamed on us. Well, Alfred State's using pirated software, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah, Node, we don't have that problem with. Microsoft, we would definitely have that problem with.
Well, but we have an MSDN, so.
True, but again, as soon as we start multiple schools, we're going to have that problem.
If we're using it multiple instances, once it goes past the proof of concept,
mm-hmm.
Because like when we go into beta, at that point, it at least depends on obviously the legality. And yes, once again, I'm going on to a boring topic, but these are things you have to go and start investigating, because they'll start blindsiding you with these types of questions out in the real world. I don't know. Why do I need to know those? I know how to code. When did they talk about the legal licensing fees? Isn't that what network administrators do? Depending on how they say it, because at that point of your development life cycle, if you're in a beta or even an alpha test, you're past the proof of concept. Proof of concept's just proving that you can do it. Once you're in the testing phase, that means that you're looking to implement it some way, shape, or form. And even if you're implementing, like, and this is the stupid part, even if you're implementing it to 5 people, that's technically an enterprise environment, because of looking at the school as an institution. They are considered an enterprise at that level, which obviously is a snowball effect from all the way up to SUNY, right? So, but
Yeah.
anyways,
Yeah. It's a conversation for another day, but there are
Yeah.
languages and frameworks out there where, again, Python's a good example. Golang would be another good example where we just don't have to worry about it.
yep.
So, yeah, awesome. So for the silent other two that have been just kind of along for the ride for most of the day, do you guys have any questions here?
Uh,
Not that I know of.
I don't have any either.
Okay, so Mike, are you clear on what you need to do for the node server, getting it up and running?
Yep. Just gotta do some Googling.
Okay, so the language itself, well, it's technically an environment, but it would be called a language. Download Node.js. Are you on Windows?
Yeah.
Yeah, just use the installer. You'll be fine. You're going to need MongoDB. You're also going to need a software called Compass, so you can actually see what's going on. Okay.
Oh, okay. Compass. Right.
Yeah.
If you don't like Compass, there's another one. It's called what is it? I think it's DBeaver or DB Beaver.
I don't remember, but yeah, that one's out there too.
Yeah.
I've seen it around, but I like Compass. There's nothing wrong with it
Yeah.
from my
No,
perspective.
the only client that I ever have had problems with would be Toad. And that was Oracle. They want it Oracle based.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So for Sarah, because we're throwing quite a bit more at you because you want to do the front end, what is your work schedule looking like for this week?
I work Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Wednesday 12 to 9, Thursday 10 to 6, and Friday 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. But Friday is Christmas Eve.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Saturday
Saturday is Christmas.
is
So
Christmas.
yes, we're gonna have a meeting on Christmas.
I mean, I totally would. Okay. Sunday.
Sunday, not sure yet. Oh, I was gonna take Sunday off because I'm going to my grandparents, but I could go like in the afternoon if we do something like in the morning.
Okay. You said Wednesday was 12 to 3
Wednesday was 12 to 9.
at night. So can we hop online to get you oriented at least? So what we'll do is go over web components. And then if you can get a couple of those running, I think you'll be in a good spot. And then again on Sunday, where we can start doing a little bit more implementation of those components, getting multiple going. And then we can start talking about Shadow DOM. And I think we'll be okay with that. And then by the time Sunday comes around, hopefully Mike will have a working server so we can actually do a little bit with it.
Sounds good. So tomorrow in the morning?
Yeah. What time are you functional by?
Let's see. I work at 12. Should probably leave at like 11:30. I could probably meet at like 8:30, 9 o'clock for like an hour and a half.
Man, you people waking up and wanting to code that early. Come on, for God's sakes. Don't wake up till the butt crack of noon, and you don't get anything done till 7, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty much dead by 7. So.
Yeah, but I see you're up at like 5:30 in the morning, and I know that we've talked about certain things, but like you don't suffer from insomnia like I do. So I'm just up for days because I can't sleep because my mind keeps racing. I just see pop on at 5:30. I'm out. He's up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a thing. But so yeah, I think 8:30 be fine for me. Sarah.
Right.
And then we'll go over those things. For Mike, I think it's pretty easy for you. If you get done before Sunday, then we can start talking about organizing and getting some wiring done.
Okay.
Sound good?
Can you go to the left side of the screen and show your database stuff again? Because I guess how much time does he have to throw at his stuff?
Well, he just needs to get the wiring done, and I don't know if he's going to struggle with that or not. So this, one, is not done, but two, is just kind of, we'll get to that point once everyone has the foundation to get something done, actually. And then we can actually really start working on a prototype here. But
Well,
yeah,
I was gonna say, I was looking just at that. If I had that, I can come up with your SQL script that you just, or the script that you can run in Mongo DB, because I just, from my struggles, and I guess with Node.js, and I mean MongoDB shouldn't be that hard to implement. It's a database client. It's click, click, click. Oh, it's installed.
Mm-hmm.
But trying to get something stood up on the Node side, I see that's going to be a lot more trial and error, like learning experience in that sense. If you were wanting, and I know that you said these aren't fully built out, but at least a script that, so I could see the partial relationships between this. Like obviously there's the one-to-many relationship between instructor to class and yada yada. But anywho's, that's fine. I can help. I don't need to help. I mean, I can go work on my own stuff, but I usually am in solitude, and I know how to do it, and they're kind of like I know how to play around with sensors, but I know Dylan said he was going to get one of those things for Christmas, but
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do the back end with Michael, the student here, then yeah, one of the things that I planned on doing instead of doing like a one-to-many, like you're talking right here, is I was just going to throw this into an array and just avoid that altogether. So if we needed all the classes for that instructor, you just get classes, and do it that way.
but then how would you be confining it from the like? Because I'm thinking of it. Never mind. I'll talk about it later.
I mean,
we're implementing different places. Like, so if English took it, like, if we were looking for classes, why would? Because we don't want to see English classes. We want to see IT classes, and then.
Right, but we're attaching it to the instructor.
Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay,
Yeah. So if I pull up.
You're basically doing composition like you would in an object, but in that, because you're saying, yeah, you're going to run all of those as an array of, like, classes will be an array of objects that will then be associated with inside as a field or a record of that instructor.
Yeah, I think it's services. Yeah, so we have a document here, and then in that is slot type array. So each document has its own slot type array. So this document would be one class, which would have the professor ID and then all the classes that they're a part of with an array of IDs.
Gotcha.
And yeah, and then right here's that class collection down here. So we're not, doesn't look like we're here's an ID, class name. Okay, so we got duplication here, but.
I didn't see that join stuff. So
yeah, it's fine.
I don't want to spoil their fun with trying to figure out how to create databases and stuff.
Yeah, it's probably my biggest weakness. Just, yeah. At least with Mongo, you're not going to get super punished for it. Your database might be big, but you'll be all right. So. All right, I think that is the thing. So, Spear, did you want to talk with Mike and see what you wanted to do with him if you want to give him the guidance over break here for the backend server, and then I'll work with Sarah, and you'll probably end up getting Dylan as well because he's going to want to do backend server language stuff.
Okay. I can help out.
Yeah,
I
you don't
guess-
have to, right?
No, I'm not saying like, oh my god, I'm trying to back out, like in that sense. What I'm saying is, I am still working 40 hours on my other stuff, and right now they're all upset because there's another mapping issue, but they don't like once again a business entity not realizing what mapping issue means, which is
Yeah.
So, like, there's the mapping from the front end to the back end. Well, the mapping that is breaking now is when they save like the model with their particular preference of data, and then when they try to reload the model, since those are two different constructs that are being hit,
Mm-hmm.
and because there's the data that spawns off data, so it's called a transient. There's transient fields in this model. And more than because we're getting NANs back through the payload, the JSON payload, when we reload a object or a model, and that then goes and causes errors and null pointers and bad gremlins to appear because somebody fed them after midnight and spilled water on them. So overall, I was saying that, and they're like, "Oh, this is another mapping issue," and they're thinking that it's from the front end to the back end. I'm like, "No, this is a mapping issue from a different spot." And then they're like, "Well, how many mapping issues do we have?" I'm like, "Every single field that you're going and you're that goes and takes the whole round trip of every single process ends up having mappings because it jumps from whatever to whatever to whatever." But so that has taken precedence as far as my time is concerned. But if you want to reach out to me, Mike, or Michael, however you want to be called, I guess don't wait till your third class with me and then finally tell me that I have Andrew Richardson and he goes by AJ. And he's like, "Well, I just let you because you're the professor." I'm like, "Tell me how you want to go by." I just thought you went by Andrew, or whatever. But you can DM me or whatever the hell they call it in Discord, private message me. I don't care. And we can talk about it and discuss things. If you end up getting stumped or stuck, I mean, heck, that was one of the first things that the first conversations Professor Briggs and I had was he had a problem with Node.js, so I was helping him out. So he was trying to get some server spun up, and it wasn't working. So if you have an issue, you can always hit me up, and I'll try to find the troubleshooting documentation for you to read.
Okay, so yeah, it sounds like if I don't answer for some reason, go ahead and hit up Spear.
Cool.
All right, everyone good?
Yep.
All right, I will see everyone eventually, and Sarah, I'll see you tomorrow. All right,
Sounds good.
see ya.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.